Unit 11. Risking It. Page 89. Vocabulary Preview. Part C. You will hear each word below in a sentence. Listen to the sentences. Write the number of the sentence that contains each word. 1.
The circumstances made driving dangerous.
2.
There is a significant risk.
3.
He couldn't control the car.
4.
I like natural food.
5.
We compared high-risk versus low-risk activities.
6.
We perceive risk differently.
7.
The actual risk is high.
8.
Crossing the street is an everyday activity.
9.
Risk-takers often injure themselves.
10.
Many accidents occur at night.
Page 91. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Today I'm going to talk about risk, or how people think about risk. First, I'll discuss two concepts: perceived risk versus actual risk. Then I'll talk about why we worry about some risks more than others. There are two important terms you need to understand before we begin: perceived risk and actual risk. Perceived risk is the way a person thinks about risk. Perceived risk is how risky or unsafe a person thinks an activity is. This is opposed to actual risk, which is the true risk, the risk of something if you actually look at how many people are hurt or injured by an activity. So let's begin with an example. An example of perceived risk versus actual risk. Let's compare two ways to travel: flying versus driving a car. Many people drive a car each day, but they don't worry about it very much. They know that there is a risk of an accident, but most people will not say they are afraid of driving. They feel that the risk is low, so the perceived risk of driving is low. On the other hand, many people worry about flying. They are afraid that the airplane will have an accident and crash. They feel that the risk of flying is higher than the risk of driving. The perceived risk of flying is high. However, in these two examples, the actual risk is very different than the perceived risk. The actual risk of driving a car is high. Many more people are actually hurt or injured in car accidents than in airplane accidents. The actual risk of flying is low. In fact, flying is 40 times safer than driving a car. But our perception is that flying is more dangerous. Why? Why do we worry about some risks more than others? Well, it turns out that we perceive risk differently in special circumstances. Some factors make a person feel that an activity is less risky. Some make us feel that an activity is more risky. but the circumstances really change our perception. There are three factors that make us feel that an activity is less risky. The first factor is control, whether the risk is an activity we control as opposed to one we don't control. In circumstances where we have more control, we feel there is less risk. For example, let's look again at driving a car versus flying in an airplane. When we drive, we control the car. We decide where to drive and how fast to go. Therefore, we feel that driving is less risky. However, when we fly in an airplane, we do not control it. Someone else is flying it, so we feel it is more risky. The second factor is whether the risk is natural versus unnatural. When a risk is natural, we feel that there is less risk. For example, we can compare being near a nuclear power plant as opposed to being out in the sun. Nuclear power plants are unnatural. That is, they're created by people, so we feel that they have a significant risk. The sun is natural, so we feel that it's low risk. However, many more people get cancer each year from the sun than from nuclear power. So being in the sun has a higher actual risk, but we feel that being in the sun is less risky because it's natural. Finally, the third factor is how common the activity is. That is, whether the risk is part of an everyday activity in contrast to an unusual event. When the risk is an everyday activity, we feel that there is less risk. For example, let's look at our feelings about accidents in the home versus an airplane accident. As I said before, flying is not a risky way to travel. Airplane accidents are unusual, but they do sometimes occur. When there is an accident, it is reported in the news and it gets lots of attention. So people worry about these accidents more. However, accidents in the home occur all the time. Each day, many people are injured or even killed doing everyday things like walking down the stairs. But we don't worry about these everyday risks as much. So you can see from these examples that people's perception of risk is very different from actual risk, and you can understand some of the reasons why. Any questions?
Page 91. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 11. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What activity has a high perceived risk?
Two.
What is an example of a risk you can control?
Three.
What is an example of a natural risk?
Four.
What is an example of an everyday risk?